So with Arena Breakout Infinite launching on Steam, that has brought a ton of new players into the game, and with all of these new players being dropped into a game that's been being played for a long time already, people are going up against people who have a lot more resources and are a lot more experienced in the game. So being able to use a very strong budget weapons is actually going to be a very big boon into getting a lot more resources, getting a lot more money, so you can start running really big kits to catch up to all of the other players that have been playing for a long time. So I wanted to go over what may be the best budget weapon for going up against higher tier kitted players, and that's going to be the G3. Now there's two really big boons to running the G3 as a budget weapon. First off, this is a fully automatic 7.62x5.1 rifle. That round is just incredibly strong, hits very hard, and generally can pen armor much more easily than some of the lower rounds. And it's just a very cheap fully automatic rifle for what it actually is. Now it does have a pretty slow rate of fire at 460 RPM, but it's a very hard hitting weapon that's very cheap. So the 460 RPM is really the biggest downside of this. But the full build we're going to be going over with this G3 without a sight, because there are so many different sights of so many different prices, is currently a little under 180,000. And this is a pretty well statted weapon, especially with the lower fire rate. You don't need as high as vertical or horizontal recoil control as you do with much higher RPM weapons. So you're really just relying on this being cheap and being a much higher caliber weapon. So starting with the pistol grip, we're just using the base grip that comes on it. For the stock, we're using the G3 modern stock. For the magazine, I think these always come with 30 rounders, so just use the 30 rounders. They're generally the same price as a 20 rounder as well, so there's not really a reason to not use it. We're using the G3 modern upper receiver, which is also going to add this top rail that you can add whatever sight you want to add onto this. Because of the caliber of this weapon, you can use it for much longer ranges. You can just use like a hollow sight or something like that for much more close ranges. You can just use red dots if you really want that. You can pretty much use whatever sight you want to use, and it's going to work well with this weapon. Then we're going to be using the G3 improved modular locking handguard. Then on that, we're going to have the front grip, which we're going to have to put on the 4.1 inch modular lock rail. Then we're going to be using the vertical front grip. This is just, I think, the best price to performance for any grip in the game right now. And then if you want to have a tactile device, you're going to be using the 2.5 inch modular lock rail and put whatever tactile device you want on it. I just end up using mini blue lasers because it's incredibly cheap, and a laser can be really helpful in close range encounters. Then we're going to be using the G3 18-inch barrel. This is the longest barrel. This will also increase your firing power. I'm not exactly sure how firepower scales a weapon's damage or anything like that, but you definitely just want the longest barrel for the stats. Then we're going to be using the MK14 suppressor. This is just going to be one of the cheaper suppressors, especially for the stats it gives. It's not much different statted compared to the other suppressors that are just much more expensive. And that's legitimately the entirety of the build you're going to be using. And again, without a sight, it's a little under 180,000. So depending on what sight you want to use, you can keep this to like a 200,000 weapon, or you can go a lot higher than that if you want to use, say, a much more expensive or longer range sight. And then that brings us into our ammo options. You're never going to use white ammo. Then you have BPZ at around 600 per round. This is the tier 3 penning ammo. 67 base damage, which again is like really high base damage compared to a lot of other calibers. Has a really good muzzle velocity as well, so you can use it at longer ranges. 32 pen, 14 armor damage. Pretty similar in the pen and armor damage as a lot of other tier 3 penning rounds, just with a lot higher base damage. So even compared to something like M855, that's a lot more expensive than this for 5.56. This has much higher base damage. So the tier 3 penning ammo is actually pretty decent for this. Then you have M80, usually sitting at like 1700 a round, which is tier 4 penning. This is generally what I would recommend to be using. It has 63 base damage, which is still really crazy compared to most other tier 4 penning ammo. Still really good muzzle velocity for longer ranges. 42 pen, 21 armor damage. Even just using tier 4 penning ammo M80 for this weapon, you can go up against much higher tiered opponents. Obviously class 4 it's going to be really good against. Even against class 5, it's going to be really good against that. Once you get up to class 6, you're not really going to be penning that, so you have to kind of break their armor and then be able to kill them through that broken armor, which is going to be a bit harder. Head-to-head battles against like tier 6 armored players, you're probably going to lose if they can actually shoot straight, but in pretty much any other situation, M80 is going to be incredibly strong, again, even against tier 5 players. And because the G3 has a much lower fire rate at 460, you're not going to be spraying out ammo. This isn't like an HK that has crazy high fire rate that you're just going to be spending hundreds of thousands every time you get into a fight. Much lower RPM means you're just not spraying out as much ammo. And I really wouldn't recommend using M62 or M61 if you've been crafting that or buying that at any point with this weapon. I would definitely just recommend saving those for more well-built weapons. But that's the entirety of this G3 build, and if you're somebody that's newer or really just looking to jump into lockdown mode, but you're not trying to use crazy expensive weapons, you're trying to use more budget kits to build up your money, this is definitely one of those weapons, especially when using M80, that will allow you to just jump into lockdown mode, still have a budget-friendly build and budget-friendly weapon, while also still being able to fight higher geared players. Like, you'll commonly come across tier 5 players in lockdown right now, and this weapon can still fight those players pretty easily when using M80. Against tier 4 players, if you're using M80, you're just going to absolutely shred them, but it's going to be very good when you're just starting to jump into lockdown mode. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.